Hello there and welcome to the program. I am Imonia Marere. It's nice to be with you again. The Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas, is a 15-nation regional bloc founded in May 1975 and primarily to advance the economic integration of the sub-region. Over the years, however, it has also taken on socio-political and security responsibilities, including resolution of electoral disputes. Since 2010, the body has been engaged in trying to steer errant members back on the straight and narrow path of democracy from military coups and electoral malfeasance. In the last 18 months, ECOWAS has had to suspend and impose economic sanctions on 3 of its members. These are Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso for violating a cardinal protocol of the body by abridging democratic rule and installing military regimes. As it were, the dying culture of military incursion into governance is beginning to rear its ugly head again in the sub-region, and this is a major concern for leaders and citizens alike in the West African sub-region. The latest is a failed coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. Now, in response, ECOWAS heads of state and government met at an extraordinary session in the Ghanaian capital Accra last week and resolved, amongst other decisions, to deploy a military force to help stabilize the country's fledgling constitutional order. A similar force had been deployed to that same country in 2012 after another coup was staged in that country, but that force was withdrawn only in 2020 at the request of the embattled president Umaru Sissoco Embalo. The 2 major strategies adopted by ECOWAS over the years to discourage and punish military incursions in its member states have been the imposition of sanctions and the suspension of such member states from the activities of the body. The deployment of military force has been used sparingly, as in Guinea-Bissau in 2012 and the Gambia in 2016, when it was required to flush out former President Yahya Jammeh when he refused to quit after losing an election. The 2 other times ECOWAS has had to deploy military forces were to halt the Liberian and Sierra Leonean civil wars in the 1990s and early 2000s. But how well have these twin strategies worked for the ECOWAS? Are there other options open to the community to deal with ambitious and recalcitrant armies of member states that attempt or succeed in venturing into political power? What is becoming obvious is that not much has been invested in preventive measures to nip coups in the bud. Some political pundits say the ECOWAS has failed to oversight the systemic failures in the affected countries, which over time have degenerated into dissatisfaction and agitations in those countries. Now, some others say ECOWAS has failed to look into the manipulative tendencies of the ruling elites to change constitutions and electoral laws of their various countries to suit their selfish tendencies. So, does ECOWAS really have the resources to enforce sanctions against erring political leaders that have made a mess of the democracy in their countries? These are some of the issues that we will be looking at today on the program, People, Politics and Power. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we will be meeting our 2 resource persons who will help us break down these issues and understand them. All right, let's get to meet our resource persons. 2 of them are here in the studio. First, from my immediate left is Paul Ejime. Paul is a journalist. He is an author, former war correspondent in Liberia and Sierra Leone. He is also a global affairs analyst, a media and political expert on elections in Africa. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Also joining us is a familiar face on this program, a security specialist and expert, Mr. Manu Yagda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amari.
Welcome. Right. So, Paul, let's begin from where they say charity begins at home. Let's begin from a familiar terrain for you. Suddenly, we are beginning to see a re-emergence of coups and military rule in the West African sub-region. Did it come to you as a surprise?
Thank you. And thank you for that powerful preamble, because it captured everything and even what should be done. We are tired of prescription about, because we are not reinventing the wheel, Imoni. Like you said, in the 90s and early 2000s, we had a situation where you had governments in the city and the other one in the forest. And then Ecowas, won international acclaim for being able to manage those crises, using what you said, a bit of carrot and stick. When it is time to deploy, you deployed, but you have to engage. And then also use preventive diplomacy. In the past 10 years, like you noted, when this erosion started, it became clear that these instruments or mechanisms were abandoned. Because when you do that, if you don't send home a black goat early enough, when it becomes dark, you will not be able to see it when, because the darkness will take over. What has happened is that ECOWAS leaders over time have now failed to do that needful of trying to nip crisis in the bud before they explode. And now once the horse has bolted out of the stable, you are now chasing. You become reactive. You cannot. So that they needed to be proactive, be attentive to all the, antenna. Your antenna should be there to know what is happening, why. But the leaders appear to be on in the high horse while the people are suffering. So you mentioned the issue of tinkering with the constitution, thereby staging what you call constitutional coups or political coups, or what I call electoral coups. Because if you won an election that is not credible, you are only cutting violence. And that is what is happening. A combination of all these failures in the so-called, by the way, they are using democratic principles. They tell you that they are holding regular or periodic elections. But how credible are these elections? And what do you do with a constitution that has suffered so much, assault, so much so that it loses all those democratic principles? I think that is where it started. ECOWAS leaders in the past 10 years have ignored those things and also not using the instruments that is there. You have the mechanism for conflict resolution and management. You have a mechanism, this early warning system is also there. What you need to do before, nip issues in the bud before they explode. They have not done that, and that is why they are now chasing fire brigade. It's not going to work unless and until the leaders also stop those forces and factors that encourage violence. Remember that it starts with the people going on the street to protest. The military, because they now have the coercive power, they now sends everybody, either the president is captured and then is looking like rats from drop in a well. Otherwise, they will use that instrument against the people when they rise. Because the people will always come and say, listen, the suffering is too much. There is poverty. There is insecurity. People cannot go to their farms. So you can't even feed yourselves. And so you know, it's a lot of ungoverned and ungovernable spaces in the Sahel. They took out the NATO and America and others took out with the leadership of France. They took out Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. And whatever was his nuisance value, he was able to keep people. So many of these armed groups found succor. They found a place in Libya. Today, Libya is a failed state. And that is why the Sahel has become a no man's land, where all sorts of armed groups are now nesting, and then from there launching attacks to as far as even Nigeria. So Mali, Burkina Faso, where Guinea, these are victims of that failure. And let me leave it there and then ask my colleague to also come.
Mr. Yagda, from a security perspective, is there an explanation to the fact that the countries where we have now seen an upsurge of coups are all French-speaking former colonies of France? Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso. Thank you very much, Mr. Amari. First and foremost, I want to point out something which is very, very critical. From 1956 to 2001, we have had 80 successful coup plots in Africa. We have had 108 attempted or failed coup. But from 2001, countries decided to go into democracy, and military tried to go to the barracks. But from 2019, or let me say from 2012, military started to raise up their ugly head again. Different decades, same government. If you had listened to the coup that took place in Mali in 2012 and 2020, in attempted coup in Niger Republic, Guinea, both Guinea-Bissau, which recently failed coup or attempted coup, then we have Guinea-Conakry, then Burkina Faso. All these coups, the so-called coupists, they hinge their excuses on three things, basic three things. Number one, each time they talked about corruption. Number two, they talked about insecurity. Number three, they talked about bad governance or weak government. Now, last week, I was listening to the president of Ghana, the chairman of Ecowas. He was trying to address what they should do to stop coups in West Africa. But he has forgotten that it is as a result of these three things that the military have the audacity to say, okay, they are going to stage a coup. We have seen not once, not twice, Ecowas will come out and then condemn coups immediately it takes place. But they have forgotten to condemn presidents that changed constitution in order to elongate his state in office. Ecowas will just keep quiet over it, which is supposed to be their responsibility. I remember when Mr. President Buhari, he warned in Niger Republic about extension of terms in order to continue in office. And I know that time he didn't call anybody's name, but he was referring to Ouattara. Ouattara went and changed the constitution. And then he went and won his election in court. So in order for you to say, okay, you have a log, you have a peg in your eye, you have to remove the log in yourself. So the Ecowas government, if they want coups to stop, they must change their governance. They must come out with policies that every country will abide by the constitution, what the constitution says. No leader should change the constitution because he wants to elongate it. They shouldn't keep quiet over it. But in such case, they will just keep quiet over it. And when military coup takes place, they condemn the coup. It's not only censoring the coup that matters. Good governance matters. If you have a good governance, military has no responsibility, anything to do with with governance. So those are some of the things that I want to bring.
So, Paul, if you look back in history, because Mr. Yagda had just talked about the reactive nature of the ECOWAS to these coups. In the past, we know we had instances where ECOWAS actually stepped in to make sure that coups don't even occur.
Yes.
I give you examples. In 2005, when Asingbe Yadema died, his son immediately took over power. But ECOWAS, then under the chairmanship of Mamadou Tanja of Niger Republic, insisted that there must be an election. And the young boy had to step down, had elections conducted before assuming presidency in Togo. Now, ironically, about 5 years after, in 2010, Mamadou Tanja himself, after completing his tenure in Niger, now sought to elongate his tenure in office. But the ECOWAS came in again and forced him out of power. And then, of course, there was also the case in 2012 of Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, who also attempted to elongate his, to change the constitution and elongate his power. And ECOWAS again stepped in and made sure that it didn't happen. But since then, it appears that the ECOWAS itself has become weakened.
Yeah.
It appears that the ECOWAS is unable to take these proactive steps. What has happened? What has changed?
Well, thank you for those chronology, because it speaks to the reason why we are where we are. And that is because the ECOWAS leadership of today, unfortunately from 2010 or whatever, will appear to have lost the gravitas. They no longer have the will. And it stems from the fact that my colleague has mentioned it, that some of them are complicit in this tenure elongation. So what they do now is that they cannot criticize themselves. They will not talk about it because they are part of the problem. But it will now take a visionary leader, somebody, and that is where Nigeria should come in. Nigeria sacrificed so much. People talk about ECOMOG, the ECOWAS ceasefire monitoring team. By the way, I was one of the embedded journalists that went with them in 1990 to Liberia. We moved from Sierra Leone. And what happened then, where people now said, never again. After Liberia, Sierra Leone, and like you mentioned, 2005 when Yassi made that. But it's not enough to hold elections. Elections have to, it's a process. It's not an end game, it's not a destination. Even democracy, you have to make sure that elections are credible. And also I remember I've worked for, ECOWAS electoral, the ECOWAS network of electoral commissions, 15 bodies. And I remember the present chairman of INEC, Independent Electoral Commission, when he was president of the governing board, he used to now make one statement that has, for which it became famous, that it is better to use ECONEC during peacetime. It is better, more cost effective, and will save you a lot. Use that during peacetime than using ECOMOG during crisis, when you have flawed elections. And that is where we are. That we cannot, you can't hide pregnancy, for God's sake, or any wound that is on your face. No matter if they try to bury their heads in their sand, it will come up. It's like eating banana and then throwing the diving. It will come up. So that is where we are. The ECOWAS, we will come to a point where instead of now analyzing the problems, what should be done, because it comes into short term, middle term, and then the long term. Since already we are in the hole, the ditch, you stop digging and find out how you can now bring those who have fallen there. We should talk about that and then talk about short term, and the long term is that they should stop. I mentioned in one write-up that this current ECOWAS, some of them, most of them, if they cannot shape up, let them ship out. They are not delivering. The people have come out, let the people also ask them questions. If they are not delivering, send them away. In Burkina Faso in 2014, Blaise Compaoré, who was implicated in a coup that removed Thomas Sankara, okay, ruled for 27 years. But when his cup was full, the Burkinabes came up on the streets, millions of them, and said, listen, you get out. And the man is now in exile. That is what will happen. Mark you, there might be bloodshed, but you must be ready to sacrifice something to get, your rights can never be given to you. You have to wrest it. You have to fight for it. That is the same thing, that the right of who governs you, of who is your leader. Most of these people now are rulers. They are not leaders. And so the people will ask questions, demand accountability from them, be it for corruption or inability or weakness to deliver on security or provision of human, making life easy for them. There are no roads. There is no hospital. You don't have schools. You have people going on medical tourism. Why can't you build hospitals in your place so that you stop that? Why can't you, when they go abroad, they see things working? It is not miraculous. It is a deliberate government policy to make things work. They are not doing it. And until they do that. And then the middle term is, get the negotiations and that, mediation that is going on should be honest. It should be, neutral. Come to neutrality. Be flexible. Go and talk with these people. Don't be flying over their heads. Sit down with them. That was what Ecowas. Do you know some Ecowas summits in those days could start in the morning and last up to the next morning until you have concrete results. But you don't hear Ecowas, they are now having more extraordinary meetings than the regular ones. And what do they achieve? If you look at the communique, it's bland. And, it does not contain anything. You are suspending people, you are imposing sanctions. Those cannot work if they are not backed by behind-the-scene actions, backstopping, and then preventive diplomacy. Send people there. Ecowas now, for instance, in Mali, you said you brought a blockade and said the 5 years that they talk or 3 years, you don't support. What alternative did you offer? Meanwhile, Algeria has come out with, Algeria is a neighbor to Mali, said, okay, listen, we do not support this long, 3 years or 5. Can we do it in 18 months? And they are going back to negotiate. But Ecowas just said, okay, because you are saying it is 5 years, then you slammed. What alternative? So when you say you don't like something, you have to present an alternative. So it appears that Ecowas that now they lack ideas. They are bereft of ideas. Those mechanisms they use in stopping those wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and even you mentioned Tanzania, when he wanted to change constitution to sack the parliament, ECOWAS said no. This was from the ECOWAS Commission. Today, you have an ECOWAS Commission that is now taking directive from their home countries. That is part of the problem. You are use the power that you have. In the Gambia, ECOWAS refused to observe the election that Yahya Jammeh held in 2011 because they said that the atmosphere was not conducive. It doesn't show anything about democracy. And they did not recognize Yahya Jammeh. But nobody supported ECOWAS. That was why Yahya Jammeh stayed from 2011 until 2016 and then tried to do what he did in 2011. Before everybody now, the eyes were open. When Nigerian Alpha Jet now was hovering, and the man was forced to be escorted into exile. So there are that is where Nigeria should come in. Nigeria, the president talks about warning his colleagues, don't elongate, but he shouldn't stop there. Because Nigeria is paying more than 70% of the budget. Yeah. Whatever happens in ECOWAS will reverberate in this country. So you have to take, and Nigeria has more than 50% of the population in ECOWAS. So you cannot pay the ordinary or scant attention to it. You have to take it as a, because if ECOWAS fails, Nigeria has failed. I know we will go to issue of external meddling. What France is doing, you talked about the fact that it's mostly in
French colonies.
Yeah.
Yes.
But these things do not respect any forms or language, in whether Lusophone, Anglophone, or Francophone. It can happen anywhere. Okay, but France also is the regular, the guilty. What do you call it? It's playing a dubious role in its former colonies because it is exploiting them for its own national benefit. It has military bases in those places and controlling the economy of most of them through the French CFA, which is domiciled in or controlled by the French treasury. So these are the issues. But you can't blame them. You blame our leaders who acquiesce, who give, because they also can steal and then warehouse what they have stolen from Africa in some of these foreign capitals. That is why they can, the France and others can manipulate them and then make them, they become weak, irrelevant, and then they can't govern their people, but they are seen now as stooges of foreign powers.
Now, Mr. Jagda, like you mentioned earlier on, one of the reasons that is always given by the military each time they have intervened in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, and even in Guinea-Bissau, has always been the issue of security.
Yes.
Now, if you look at these three countries, particularly Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, and in fact, even Guinea-Bissau, you look at the security situation in which these four countries emerged. Some of them from the Sahel region, and some of them from the coastal region. Now, what role do you think that external forces are playing in the destabilization of the governments of those countries?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, let us start with the Mali coup of 2012. That Mali coup in 2012, it was instigated, the rebellion was instigated by France, supporting the Tuaregs to carve out northern Mali out of Mali for obvious reasons. Number one, France was the colonial master of Mali. They know exactly the quantity of mineral deposits in Kidal, Gao, and Timbuktu. They know exactly the deposit, the gas deposits. They know exactly the gold deposit, especially around Gossi. Now, Mali is divided into two. The southern Mali, which has 7 regions, and then the northern Mali that has 3. Now, the blacks of Mali, they don't quite agree with France as the northern Mali. So France wanted them to carve out Azawad. That was why France was 100% or is 100% behind the MNA, the Tuaregs, till today. As I'm talking to you today, since 2012, no Malian government, the Malian government have never entered Kidal and said, okay, they have the authority, it's 100% under France. The coup of 2012, it was Mali, it was France that instigated it, but they fell out by the incursion of Al-Qaeda, by Akim, Al-Qaeda in Islam Maghreb. And then they hijacked the rebellion. Then France said no, they went against them. Mark you, what's happened now in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, all these countries now, France, some of them don't agree with France. That's number one. So the military that they don't quite like the French people, they tend to incline to another bloc. And that's why Russia came in. When there was a problem between Malian government, especially the military government, and the France, the military government said, please, France forces, that the Bakken and the ISGS, should please leave Mali. They should leave Timbuktu. And they left Timbuktu. Some of them moved to Gao, some of them moved to Kidal. And then the Malian military junta went and invited the Wagner, they call it Wagner group, under the pretense that they are going to train the Malian military. Today, as I'm talking to you, the same Wagner group, how you call it, they are in Burkina Faso. They are supporting the Mali of Burkina Faso. Russia is doing this thing for two things. You know what's happening between Russia and the West over the expansion of NATO. NATO is trying by all means to move into Ukraine, to over Ukraine. Then Russia said no, because Ukraine is very strategic to Russia. It will not agree. What happens? Ukraine is very strategic for Russia for three reasons. The first reason, Ukraine is very strategic, is serve as a buffer to Russia and the West. If Ukraine join NATO, that means US can easily deploy its arsenal in Ukraine. And from Russian border, from Ukraine border
yes.
to Morocco, to Moscow, is only 500 kilometers, which ordinary missile can reach. So they will not allow Ukraine to enter NATO. That's number one. Number two, if NATO moves into Ukraine, that means the operation or the Russia cannot use Black Sea throughout the year for international trade, because it is only Black Sea that Russia uses for international trade on water throughout the year. It doesn't freeze. All other water sites freezes during winter. So that's the only place. So if they allow NATO to move into Ukraine, that means they will not get used, they will not...
So this is the international dimension. What is happening in the West African sub-region now.
So now...
Economic and strategic reasons and purposes.
Yes. So now, what Russia is doing is, anywhere they have opportunity to deal with Western interests, they move in. It becomes contagious. Today, if there's any country now that's having problem with France or any of these things, if they stage a coup, Russia will support them. So that's the international dimension. So it becomes contagious. So any military group now, especially within the Francophone country now, they're not there even if they stage a coup. When it comes to international sanction, it will not affect them because Russia will back them. China will back them. Now, if you put it on the other side, if you look at the Al-Qaeda groups and the ISIS groups that are moving southwards, they have their bases, most of their bases, in Mali and Burkina Faso. And we told the government, you remember the time when France moved their arsenal, sometimes last year, moved their arsenal from Côte d'Ivoire to Niger Republic. And the Malian masses said no. The
Nigerian...
Burkina Faso. They said no. They will not allow. So they went and blocked the movement. And they stayed there for almost a week. It was the government of Roch Christian Kabore that came out and then sent the rioters away for the French troops to pass. And they passed. That thing, it really hurt the Burkina Fasons. So when that coup took place, they were very happy because it's against France. And they are very happy about it. And I'm sorry to say that if care is not taken, one more country that has to be very, 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 very careful is Niger Republic. Because there's this discontent between the masses in Niger Republic and the France rule. Just as he rightly said, the influence of France on these countries is weighing too much on the populace, and they're not happy about it. So if there's anything that they can do to discredit France, they will do it. So that's the international connection. And then we too, just as we said, Nigeria constitutes more than 50% of the population in Ecowas. We contributed more than 70% of the money used for Ecowas. When there was a crisis, or when there is a crisis in Mali, France is there. Algeria is there. When we went there, we didn't go there to make an impact. And if you go and talk to average Malian, he will tell you that they expect Nigeria to move in so that they will determine the government in Mali. We are not moving into Mali to determine the government in Mali. So that's how weak we are. We have the opportunity, we have the tool to show our presence, but we don't want it. We just go there and then, and just like a tea party. No, Nigeria is supposed to take a decision on Mali, which the Malians are ready to accept. That was why they offered to Nigeria. They can help us in reducing the number of terrorists moving into Nigeria. Mark you, in Mali, they have the terrorist groups, they have the armed groups, then they have the pro-government groups. We're not talking about the terrorist groups. We're talking about the tribal groups. People like Gandaizo, people like Gandokoi, people like Gacha, people like Nasema. They are not terrorist groups. Like Gandokoi is 100% Fulanis. And they know. So why can't Nigeria now make use of this and say, okay, if you see any terrorists moving from Libya to Nigeria, please accost them on our behalf. They will do it.
But at least for our own strategic and security purposes.
Yes.
Yes. So it does appear to me, Paul, that we are not, as a country, I'm talking of Nigeria, and have been as proactive and as assertive as we were in the past when we took the bull by the horns in moving into, in constituting ECOMOG and moving into Liberia and
Gambia,
Sierra Leone at that time. Now, considering the fact that if you look at the terrain and our geography, we are surrounded, as it were, by Francophone-speaking countries. Should we, as a country, not be doing more? And given the statistics that you have presented here now, Nigeria has over 50% of the entire population of the West African sub-region. We ought to be in a commanding position here.
Yes. Well, some may argue that the times and circumstances have changed. In those days, well, you say Nigeria had petrodollar, because it had used it actually to also influence international politics, actually getting the independence for many African countries, South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and all that. Yeah, Nigeria has played that big brother role. But now that the situation has also changed, because you will say, how has Nigeria been paid back in all these things that it has done? Perhaps there is a need for review or recalibration of that Africa First policy, because that was what informed all this. To say, listen, now you cannot love other people more than yourself. Okay? Nigerians cannot be suffering, and then you are using Nigerian resources to go and help other countries. So you need to bring that balance to make sure that
helping other countries to help yourself.
Yeah, yes, it is. But in doing so, you have to be careful not to be seen to be popular abroad, while domestically you are people are against you. That is the issue. But I agree with you. By the way, when you talk about this, when these countries want anything from Nigeria, they come here. They visit Aso Rock, or from time immemorial. They've always been coming. Benin, even Guinea-Bissau, their minister was there. Ambalo came. He said that the President Buhari is his father. He said so. It is when they come to get, and they don't say those things just like that. They are coming to ask for assistance. But what is important is that for Nigeria to use what it has to get what it wants. If you are giving somebody something, like the Americans, go to the UN, for instance. UN, America contributes about 25% of the UN budget. And then there are certain things you cannot do without America.
Sir, that's what I say. That's why we shouldn't be Father Christmas.
That is, you cannot be a Father Christmas.
Yes.
So it's not a case of because it will affect you, so that's what you are doing. Do it with strategic interest. Structure them kind of a way of getting, if you are invest like an investment. If you are putting 100 naira, make sure that you are getting up to 90 or 95 kobo. Because in economics, they will tell you that any investment that does not bring you back 30% ROI, return on investment, is not worthwhile. So you can't be a Father Christmas. You are going there with strategic mechanism to be able to make sure that you are keeping the neighbors. Nigeria used to do that good policy of good neighborliness. Yes, get your neighbors right. Ecowas is one of them. How do you do it? You have to choose, not when you make, for instance, when the president tells his colleagues to stop this tenure elongation, and nobody listens to Nigeria. It means you have lost, it's not just saying it, but making sure that it is implemented. It is that enforcement, that the power to exert, not just talk, to walk the talk. That is what is lacking. And I think when it comes there, because I've attended meetings, high-level meetings where some of these leaders will stand up in those days to talk, make some suggestions, and Nigeria will tell them, okay, are you ready to fund what you are? For instance, when ECOWAS went from 9 commissioners to 15 commissioners, it was Nigeria that supported it. And you know how much, what it does? A drain on the system. Now they are rushing back to now 7 commissioners because that decision was, but Nigeria allowed it. So it's not just enough, it's not just giving money, but there are, you can, in the decision that they take, you have to be present there. You have to make your presence felt. You have to assert your power. You have the population. You have the money, because all the contributions of so many countries put together cannot equal what Nigeria is putting there. So why can't you, in terms of, there is no correlation between what you are spending, between, they tell you expenses and assets.
And the benefits
and
that
the benefits are not,
it's our fault.
They're not,
It is our fault.
We're actually losing. So much so that some people are saying, what is Nigeria getting? Well, okay, close there. Nigeria can, in fact, President Wade at one point in those days said that Nigeria is too big to belong to ECOWAS. Nigeria should be on its own, given its size and then its wealth. But you cannot do that, because there are some economic and geopolitical, in geopolitics you have to think about it, that you mentioned it, and neighbors are francophone. You can't, your neighbor is your greatest security officer. No matter how small you may think they are, they can, puncture your ego. So you have to take them along, but make them understand that you are the big boy, not just giving money, but making sure that what you give, you have the returns on investment.
Mm. Yeah, Mr. Yagda, you were trying to jump into the discussion there.
Yes, sir.
Because we're looking at the situation now, for instance, where ECOWAS, what it does most of the time now is react to what has happened, and then impose sanctions, economic blockade, and all of that, and in very few cases, military force. In any case, there ought to be a standing military force for the ECOWAS that has not taken off, as it were. It is still ad hoc as it is today. It's only when situations like has happened in Guinea-Bissau now comes up that they scramble to put a force together and send in there. Unlike when they should have a standing military force that could intervene in any of these situations. But how efficacious, how potent has economic blockades and sanctions and deployment of military forces been in matching action with words?
Thank you very much. When it comes to the issue of a standing force, ECOWAS had wanted to have a standing force stationed in strategic areas. For instance now, if you look at US, we have so many commands. We have the Eastern Command, we have the African Command, we have the Western Command, of which an African Command, they decided to go and put the headquarters in Stuttgart for obvious reasons. Now, if it is too hard for us to have a standing force somewhere where there will be standby, They say, okay, something happened now. You have a minimum or maximum of 2 hours of 24 hours or maximum of 48 hours. Where is the standing force? Go and intervene. But in this case, when something happens, you have to start making consultations with Nigeria. You make consultations with Ghana, make consultations with Cote d'Ivoire. Before you could muster this standing force to go and intervene, it takes time. And before this time, things must have spoiled. But there's something which is very strategic. People have been crying for it under the Ecowas countries. Some of the Ecowas countries want it to happen, but some of them are reluctant about it. The issue of having joint border security agencies. Because all this is because of the security of the environment. When you say there is an insecurity, the government is not providing enough for the military, to look after it, they are all bothered on insecurity. Once you have a peace within that country, there will be no problem. So, ECOWAS country, they must sit down again. They have a lot of charters, a lot of declarations,
yes,
all this and that, which are very good, but they are not implementing some of these things. There is a charter. There is a charter on transportation, illegal transportation of small arms and light weapons in West Africa. If you read that booklet, it is comprehensive. Out of it, no single one that each of these countries observe it. Had it been moved with that charter, as of today, we are not supposed to have all these U.S. military drone bases surrounding Nigeria, all the Francophone surrounding Nigeria. Because they have talked about it in that charter. But today you go to Agadez, you see U.S. drone base. You go to Niamey, you see U.S. drone base. You go to N'Djamena, you see U.S. You go to Garoua, you see U.S. drone base. You go to Republic of Guinea, you see U.S. air drone area where they will just come and land. They are all in that charter. See, the suspicion, the major problem is there is a suspicion between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries. That one is obvious. For instance now, if to say there is no suspicion between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries, all these drone bases that are stationed in Francophone countries surrounding Nigeria, for a purpose in the sense that Chad and Niger, these two countries, they know that it is easier for Nigeria to fight external war than to fight an internal war. France know it, US know it. So for that reason, if they want to keep us perpetually under threat, not that France nor US want any terrorist group to take over Nigeria. No, they don't want it. But they want us so that we'll have perpetual problem in Nigeria, so that we don't have peace for their own political reason. So ECOWAS countries, they must sit down and then pick those books. Because I remember it was Obasanjo who signed one of those books. It was a very fantastic book. The rules are there, the regulations are there, but they are not following it. So let the leaders go back. It's not difficult. They are not going to sit down and let them go back and then pick those books, read it, and then start implementing it. We have a very perfect West African region. Thank you very much.
So the protocols are there, Paul, but implementation is usually a problem. But I want to come back to this whole issue of economic sanctions, blockade, we talked about earlier. If ECOWAS imposes economic sanctions and they are while doing that, they know, for instance, that Algeria from the northern axis will in fact make nonsense of that economic blockade. Morocco, or we are from Mauritania and all of that, and that where Russia and China are also beginning to have a lot of influence in the sub-region. What is the use of pronouncing sanctions that you know will not work?
Yeah, it's about saving face. Because I think ECOWAS is grouping now. They are scrambling. When you are confused and you don't have ideas, you begin to scratch your head and do. That is what it is. Because, they work, really. That is when they are backed by some other actions, like engagement. Going there to sit with these people to bring, tell them failure in the route that they are taking. Make sure that they sit that it's not flying in every weekend or whatever. Sit with them. What do you want? Ask them. That is strategic and engagement. When you now do that, you will be able to tease out, know how their strength, who is behind them, how they reason, and when you do that now, and you go with people. For instance, I'm glad that the Ecowas, they now sent military chiefs and their ministers to Burkina Faso. Unlike, there is no sanction on Burkina Faso now. I think Ecowas is learning his lesson, because the one on Mali and Guinea has not worked. So there is failure there. So because they have not followed and you are not reinventing the wheel, for Christ's sake. It's been used before, but these people are not using it, they are not applying it because they are also complicit. Can you believe that Ecowas that is doing this has also elongated the tenure of the commissioners and the president of the commission? Meanwhile, tenure elongation is what is causing problems. So you ask yourself, so there is insincerity, there is psychophancy and all that. These are and then playing, you don't have independent of opinion or critical thinking. It's no longer there. That is why a France will come and dictate. Let us not kid ourselves. Geopolitics, remember we used to have Cold War between the West and the East. It will be there. But it is also for Africa to assert itself. We form what you call non-aligned movement and all that. It has come to a stage where you either pitch your tent, you with Russia, or the Nigerian foreign minister, Godfrey Onyema, at one point when they were complaining about the fact that Russia or China is now, he said, you make yourself a beautiful bride. Let them begin to cut you, because Africa is where it's happening. Africa is where you have the resources, where you have the potential that is no longer in all these capitals. So you have to maximize it. How do you do that? With what you have. When they now come, when the Chinese come, don't let anybody dictate to you who to do business with. They will protect themselves. France will do so. But you now, as you are independent for Christ's sake, for how many years now? 60 years. Why would you allow French people or Americans or Europeans to be dictating to you? You have to stand your ground. Be independent. That independence, it appears, is only flag that they changed for us and that we didn't get the substance.
All right, gentlemen, we could go on and on. The issues are quite straightforward, and I think we have offered very helpful suggestions. That is, if the ECOWAS leaders and those who are in charge at the Commission are listening, time to change some tactics, not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but at least change some tactics and achieve better results. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Paul Ejime is a journalist and author, former war correspondent in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and he is a global affairs analyst, media and political expert on elections in Africa. Thank you so much for your time. And Manu Yagda, Mr. Manu Yagda is a security specialist. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics and Power. Bye for now.